Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is our special 25th Amendment, the President is Unfit to Serve edition of O'Connor and Company at 7:07.
So sad.
On this Friday in the nation's capital, Patrice, Onwuka.
It is a Friday in the nation's capital and across the rest of the country.
We're going to break out everything that happened yesterday on a very bad, awful day for Joe Biden, and you're right, for the rest of our nation as well, as we deserve to have a properly functioning commander-in-chief.
We do.
Although when Kamala Harris is the alternative, I don't know if we're actually filling that recipe either. Coming up in 30 minutes, John Fund will join us at 8:15. Joe Theismann, Redskins legend, on the Super Bowl this weekend. And then actress Gina Carano will join us at 8:35 to break down that lawsuit that she's engaged with against Disney. Big fan of Gina Carano. So that's all coming up. Again, I'm Larry O'Connor. She is Patrice Onwuka. And let's try to get to this. Yesterday, the horrible day for Joe Biden. We won't have a whole lot of time to get it because I want to get right to the press conference that was supposed to fix everything, right? But
damage control.
Yeah, not so much. Damage control. Put that fire out. Here, use this flamethrower. The special counsel that was looking into the President of the United States mishandling of classified documents was submitted yesterday. In the document, it said in no uncertain terms that, yes, Joe Biden had violated the law with regard to handling of classified documents, and detailed that in no uncertain terms. The comparison showing the pictures of these documents just haphazardly sitting in a broken cardboard box in his garage compared to how Donald Trump was handling his presidential records that was claimed by the archive to be classified documents that he wasn't supposed to have. Those were under lock and key in a sequestered office at Mar-a-Lago, a very secure environment, I can assure you, and with Secret Service monitoring the entire time. Joe Biden's, first of all, wasn't a president or vice president when he started handling these documents. He was a senator, so he never should have kept them in the first place. And then the way he kept him was outrageous. But the reason that the special prosecutor didn't bring any charges here, despite the fact that he violated the law, was basically because he thought a jury would be very sympathetic to Joe Biden because he was an elderly, feeble-minded man who had no memory, couldn't remember what year his son died, couldn't remember what years he was vice president during the depositions. So, I mean, good news is Joe Biden doesn't have to be in a courtroom like Donald Trump does, so we've got, again, validation of the double standard in our Justice Department. But the bad news is that we have a completely mentally incompetent president. We should trigger the 25th Amendment as soon as possible. We deserve to have a fully functioning commander-in-chief.
We do. You know, it's so interesting to suggest that you can't hold a feeble old man accountable for his crimes when I'm pretty sure that's what the Nuremberg trials were all about, holding former Nazi soldiers accountable for their crimes. I'm not saying that he's a Nazi. I'm just saying that there is nothing wrong with holding accountable people, regardless of their age and mental capacity. That maybe a judge can decide differently. Interestingly, we saw a response from Nikki Haley, who said the double standard is obvious, and if President Trump wants, he should just claim what the Justice Department has said about Biden and claim that he's feeble-minded and can't remember and shouldn't stand on trial. Now, I don't think that President Trump is going to take that argument because he's trying to set up a dichotomy of, you've got feeble-minded Joe and you've got me, I'm whip smart. But you know what? It's just so interesting that is the excuse. I'm sure there are a lot of older men who are sitting behind prison right now who didn't have Biden as a last name and who are saying, well, wait a minute, what about me?
Yeah. And it's funny you should say, Trump should use Biden's argument because the White House counsel and the attorneys for Joe Biden actually used Donald Trump's defense and Donald Trump's argument that he is using. They said to the special prosecutor, listen, this is all covered in the Presidential Records Act. These documents are either the personal property of Joe Biden or they are documents that, as the former vice president, he has every right to have in his possession. That's literally what Donald Trump is saying. The only difference here, of course, is Donald Trump is a president. not a vice
right.
president, and not a senator, which gives him even more power and ability to declassify things. It's outrageous, the double standard. But the news was spreading, and the reaction to Joe Biden being characterized this way by the special prosecutor, it got so out of hand that at the end of the day, Joe Biden decided that he needed to, do some, as you put it, damage control, that he needed to get out in front of this story, and he called an emergency last-second press conference to address the issues. And it didn't go well. Let's start with cut 35 here. That part of the deposition that he gave, he said, listen, I was working with my ghostwriter. I sent my ghostwriter down into this room. I told him that there were classified documents in that room and he could get them and then bring them in so we could start writing part of this book. So the prosecutor says, yeah, he gave his ghostwriter access, unauthorized access to classified documents. When confronted with that, here's how he responded.
Not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter?
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
But the special counsel said in the report that
he did not say that.
Okay.
He did not say that.
But Mr. President,
but he did say that, and it's on tape. Either that or he's saying the special prosecutor is lying. And there's only one way to know, and that is let's get all the transcripts of his depositions, which exactly is what the Oversight Committee is calling for. The Oversight Committee and Congressman Jim Jordan from the Judiciary Committee is saying we need to see the full transcripts. What if the special prosecutor reached this conclusion about the President of the United States, then we deserve full transparency. We should see what the special prosecutor saw. Speaker Mike Johnson put out a statement on behalf of the majority in the House, the leadership, and he also said that the president appears to be unfit to serve. This is the beginning on the Republicans' end in the House of the 25th Amendment process moving forward, Patrice. Oh, and so let me go to a little bit more. There was one moment where this claim that Joe Biden does not know where, what year his son dies, which, by the way, he raises the specter of his son anytime he can for his own political purposes. And then when you dare to ask him or challenge him about his son, he starts flying. How dare you take his name out of your mouth? How dare you even say that? So here's cut 40. This is Joe Biden talking about his son's death.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that?
Yeah, there we go.
Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented. I wear, since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of...
Well, and then he trails off. He can't remember the name of the church from Our Lady of whatever. So he's emphasizing, of course I remember everything about the death of my son. Look at this rosary. He got it from... Well, I can't remember where he got it from. And then there was this moment where he was trying to flex his national security foreign policy muscles about his negotiations with Egypt with regard to refugees coming from the Palestinian territories. Look at this, cut 41.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard.
He just confused.
Larry, did Mexico just suddenly gain a border with Israel?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, you heard right. In the press conference that he cobbled together at the last minute to show the press and the American people that, of course, he has full functioning mental capacity and memory, he confused the country of Mexico with the country of Egypt. And he didn't even notice as he did it. You know, sometimes you do a flub, you stop, oh, wait, did I say that? This is, like I said, it's 25th Amendment time. This is unbelievable. It's outrageous. We'll have more. As the show goes on. But real fast, we want to check in on the Mark Stein defamation suit that reached a conclusion yesterday. This thing's been going on for, a decade and a half. So we'll hear from Phelim McAleer, who's been covering that in just a moment on a very busy Friday morning. First at 7:15, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the 5s, Jamie Witten's in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
News is brought to you by New Look Home Design.
WMAL, making sense of the economy because it's your money and your retirement. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Phelim McAleer is a filmmaker, a screenwriter, a podcaster, and journalist, and a friend. And he's been in town covering a story that many people probably just sort of forgot about, because I feel like this has been ongoing for like 14, 15 years. This is a defamation lawsuit. Michael Mann, the climate scientist, and I'm using quotation marks with my fingers, against Mark Stein and another blogger who Michael Mann says defamed him. And Phelim McAleer now joins us because Michael Mann actually won this round in court, didn't he, Phelim?
He did. He did. An amazing result when you heard what came out in court. Yes, he was awarded $1 million punitive damages against Mark Stein, $1 nominal dollar in compensatory damages, but the big win was the $1 million punitive.
How does this happen? This is a First Amendment case right from the beginning, Phelim, and remind people what is alleged here, what Mark Stein allegedly did to earn this penalty.
Well, they made the very obvious point, right, when Jerry Sandusky at Penn State University. So, let's go back to the start. ClimateGate happened. Michael Mann was shown to be involved in some very, very unorthodox activity as a scientist, forwarding emails about deleting emails, trying to blacklist peer reviewers, talking about hiding the decline in temperatures, all sorts of
right. Hide the decline. The decline is the quote from his email, and this has to do with the declining temperatures because it appeared in that email that he wanted to ensure that the data showed that temperatures continued to get hotter. So he said, can we? Go ahead.
Yeah. This was a private little email among a group, and all the guys, I used Mike's nature trick to hide the decline. Now, the decline was technically wasn't in temperatures. It was actually the decline in our ability to actually predict or say what the temperature was in the past. So Michael Mann had this hockey stick where temperature was flat for 1,000 years, and then it suddenly shot up. And hide the decline was the big one. But really, the email showed a pattern of unprofessional, unscientific behavior. He was independently investigated by Penn State, who exonerated him. Fine. Then, less than a year later, Jerry Sandusky was convicted, and it turned out that Penn State had independently investigated Jerry Sandusky and cleared him as well, and allowed him to go on and molest and abuse children. So Mark Stein and Rand Simberg made the obvious point: how can we trust an organization that covered up for a child rapist? How can we trust their report into a much less serious offense, by the way, scientific misconduct? We need another investigation. So Michael Mann said, this is comparing me to Jerry Sandusky. They made the point, we're not comparing you to Jerry Sandusky. We're comparing the investigation, Penn State's investigation into you. So he sued on that grounds. The jury in the jury questionnaire, they all believed in global warming. It's a DC jury.
Yeah.
I think, people in the world need to realize that it looks like conservatives don't get justice in modern liberal cities.
Well, Phelim, I mean, that's one of the outcomes of this, but I'm wondering about the chilling effect. I mean, there's so many bloggers, frankly, the blogging space took off in politics because conservatives found a way to get information analysis or outside of the traditional media by going directly to the consumer online. And so do you expect there to be a chilling effect when writers and bloggers start to investigate people like Michael Mann for their unscientific practices and their frankly, I call it malfeasance when it comes to hiding information? Is that what really is going to be the big outcome of this case?
Look, it's made me worried. I have to say, it's made me worried about what I'm writing. I'm an independent blogger, journalist. But as you know, if you study something long enough, you'll come across a good story you work as a journalist diligently, and sometimes you'll come across a story that nobody else has got. But now, do you want to be the person? People who stick their necks out in America these days get their heads chopped off.
Yes.
And you cannot challenge the king in America nowadays, I think.
It is a bit. Mark Stein said, look at how Penn State handled the Jerry Sandusky thing. How are we sure that they handled this thing right? Suddenly he says, you're comparing me to Jerry Sandusky. Earlier in the program, Patrice made the point. It's like, Joe Biden's too old and feeble to face charges on classified documents. Well, at the Nuremberg trials, that's what the Nazis said about, their time at the camps. It's like, okay, you just compared them to Nazis. That's right, though. Here comes your lawsuit. Exactly. It's a rhetorical device, Phelim. It's how we use the English language to make a point.
Yes.
I'm glad you've been covering this in such a unique way, by the way, with your podcast as well. How's Mark doing? Did you talk to Mark Stein, and how is this sitting with him?
He's doing a lot better than I'm doing, actually. No,
really?
He said he expected it. He expected it. He's been talking about the corrupt DC justice system for about 12 years since this case started. So it's not entirely unexpected. He knew that the fix was in, and he's hoping to take it further. Look, it's a new dawn in American journalism, actually, and in American free speech. And I think they didn't. They definitely tried to make the free speech argument, but actually, speaking to members of the legal teams, and Mark represented himself, but speaking to people close to them, they didn't go all in on the free speech argument because they said it's a young jury, and young people don't think free speech is a good thing these days.
That's terrifying too. Well, listen, Phelim, thanks. We've been talking about it for quite some time. It is a scandal that isn't discussed enough in this country and in the legal world, that the jury pool in Washington, D.C. is outrageously biased. It is impossible to get a fair trial here if you are anywhere right of center, and this proves it out as well. Phelim, thanks for joining us. We're out of time. It's a busy morning, as you know.
Yes, listen, our podcast, ClimateChangeOnTrial.com, we do reenactments of the court case from the transcript. So,
it's great. It's like radio theater. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful and engaging. You're doing a great job with it.
Mark Stein representing himself was a joy to watch. Unfortunately, the audience, the most important audience of all, didn't agree. But people can listen to his full opening and closing speeches on Climate Change on Trial, a podcast. It's wonderful to listen to, and maybe it'll cheer people up.
Thanks, Phelim, and our best to your great wife, Annie, as well.
Thank you so
we love you
much.
both.
Thank you, guys.
Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Let's keep things rolling here on an intensely busy morning in the world of news and politics. Of course, we'll continue to discuss yesterday's disaster of a press conference cobbled together at the last minute by the White House to make Joe Biden look mentally fit and competent, and it made him look worse than what the special prosecutor's document described. This could be the beginning of maybe a 25th Amendment process. We'll get to the details of that coming up in a bit. Plus, Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin. Plus, at 8:15, Redskins legend Joe Theismann on a Super Bowl preview. And if that ain't enough, 8:35, actress Gina Carano, she, of course, from The Mandalorian, she's suing Disney over wrongful termination over her political views. I'm Larry O'Connor, alongside Patrice Onwuka. What a morning, Patrice. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Larry. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yes, Friday indeed. And it's definitely a happy Friday for Donald Trump, who run walking away yesterday in the Nevada caucus, as well as the U.S. Virgin Island caucus. In Nevada, he was kind of the only one left standing on the ticket because Nikki Haley decided politically to try to do the primary on Tuesday, where, of course, she lost to none of the above. He won Nevada easily with 99% of the vote. He also won in the Virgin Islands, where I've been all week covering the caucus down here, with 74% of the vote. And also our colleague and friend John Fund, columnist at National Review and elections expert, he's also down in the Virgin Islands, and he joins us now. John, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Larry.
So we were talking last night about this disaster for President Joe Biden, and you had mentioned, there's actually quite a history of White Houses keeping the reality of a president's health from the people, from the public. Tell me what your research has shown in terms of how the people very rarely get to see just how incapacitated our president has been.
Well, Larry, there is a reason why the Gallup poll reports only 26% of Americans have a lot or much confidence in the mainstream news media. It's because they don't feel they're getting the full and complete story. Axios, which does a lot of good work, is the conventional wisdom oracle of Washington. Mike Allen, who is a great guy there, said in this report this morning, quote, "For years now, White House advisors have carefully choreographed President Biden's moves to avoid what exploded in full view yesterday, a vivid display of an elderly man struggling on the public stage," unquote. All of that is true, Larry, but why weren't we told this before?
Yeah.
We weren't told this before because the media is in too often cahoots, and sadly, because 90% plus of the media is Democratic, it's mostly benefiting Democratic presidents, they cover up for their health problems. Woodrow Wilson, after his stroke, had his wife practically running the government behind the scenes. Is Joe Biden doing some of that without our knowledge? We don't know. Franklin Roosevelt was the most egregious. He hid the fact he was dying from the public in an election year. This is from the New York Times I'm about to read to you. Dr. Ross McIntyre, Roosevelt's personal physician, told him in early 1944 he probably would not finish out his term. A day later, Roosevelt insisted on announcing he would run. Then McIntyre told reporters Roosevelt's health was the best it had ever been. Several days later, Mr. Dr. McIntyre, a naval officer, was promoted to rear admiral. Now, this cover-up is called by the New York Times. The New York Times. This was the most egregious deception of American voters possible and helped contribute to a climate of cynicism about politicians.
Well,
now, then we go to JFK. JFK was filled with mood-altering painkillers by his Dr. Feelgood. He had Addison's disease that was hidden from the public. He was often immobile and had to descend Air Force One in an elevator. Doctors believed he wouldn't have survived a second term if he'd been reelected.
Wow.
This is a pattern of behavior, and Biden is part of it.
Well, John, I mean, this is incredible. I appreciate all of the historical examples of these presidents and how much has been hidden from us. You know, I think most people believe, and just NBC polling this week, where the margin between Biden and Trump on who's more competent and who's effective, you know, has doubled from 2016 or 2020. So obviously Americans recognize what's going on here, and the only people who don't seem to is the White House. But taking this to the political realm, this week, House Democrats are on retreat. This weekend, they're on retreat. What do you think is being said there? And are they trotting out the White House doctor to say, oh, guys, everything is fine, keep Biden on the top of the ticket? Or are they having real serious conversations?
Well, publicly, of course, they're defending Biden. Privately, they're panicked. Look, as for the White House physician, he gave Biden a clean bill of health physically last year. Three things, though. He only gave him a physical examination. There were no cognitive tests. 2, the House physician issued a one-page statement. 3, he took no questions from reporters. That is malpractice to the American people. Now, let me be very blunt here. President Biden had a shaky news conference yesterday. Look, everybody can have a shaky news conference when they're angry, as he was. But he can clear all of this away tomorrow. Take a cognitive test and release the results. Take a cognitive test and release the results. What do you two think the odds are he will do that?
Oh,
0.
0 to 0. Yeah, absolutely.
Just for the same reason he wouldn't do the Fox Super Bowl show. Think about this. The president never has a bigger audience than at the Super Bowl halftime. Never. For 2 years in a row, Biden has refused to do it. That tells you everything you need to know.
John Fund, we got to leave it there. Great stuff, though, as always.
Thank you,
and good
John.
to see you covering the caucus in the Virgin Islands. Have a good one, man.
Thank you.
You know, it just occurred to me to mention, Patrice, that Joe Biden, he dodged having charges filed against him, criminal charges for mishandling of classified documents, because the prosecutor thought he had no memory and he was feeble and too mentally incompetent to stand trial. He then called a press conference yesterday to prove that he had a great memory and he was completely competent. So I mean, does that mean they should bring the charges against him? I mean,
that's a fair
should the prosecutor say, okay, Mr. President, you claim that you're fine and your mental capability, okay, get ready for your criminal charges. I mean, what are we doing here?
Good question, but this is what happens when politics meets up with policy, and they are totally in conflict, and we see what the president cares more about, not the country, his politics.
Only in a news cycle like this can a blockbuster one-on-one interview from Tucker Carlson with Vladimir Putin sort of be, third, fourth, fifth story on our lineup.
Yeah, I know, right?
But we've got a little bit of this. Let's start with cut 42, Tucker in Moscow.
In the war of propaganda, it is very difficult to defeat the United States because the United States controls all the world's media and many European media.
That's quite a statement from an avowed communist propagandist himself.
Yeah.
And in cut 43 here, there's a specific question about monetary policy right now.
To use the dollar as a tool of foreign policy struggle is one of the biggest strategic mistakes made by the U.S. political leadership. The dollar is the cornerstone of the United States power, but they won't stop printing. What does the debt of $33 trillion tell us about? As soon as the political leadership decided to use the US dollar as a tool of political struggle, a blow was dealt to this American power. I would not like to use any strong language, but it is a stupid thing to do and a grave mistake. Look at what is going on in the world. Even the United States allies are now downsizing their dollar reserves. Seeing this, everyone starts looking for ways to protect themselves. But the fact that the United States applies restrictive measures to certain countries, such as placing restrictions on transactions, freezing assets, etc., causes grave concern and sends a signal to the whole world. Do you even realize what is going on or not? Does anyone in the United States realize this? What are you doing? You are cutting yourself off. All experts say this. Ask any intelligent and thinking person in the United States what the dollar means for the U.S. You're killing it with your own hands.
Obviously, there was a lot of criticism that people didn't want Tucker Carlson to do this because they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want so-called Vladimir Putin to have a so-called platform to be able to criticize America, criticize our policies. There was also, by the way, I had said, listen, if Tucker doesn't ask tough questions, if he doesn't challenge him on the detention of that Wall Street Journal reporter, that would be a disappointment. Well, he did. In fact, Tucker said, why don't you just release this reporter right now and he can come home with me? Why don't we do that? And Putin revealed that he is working through back channels to work something out, and they're hoping to release this reporter.
Oh, interesting. That's great.
But he did challenge him on that. And I think the overwrought hand-wringing and the hysterical reaction to Tucker Carlson doing this interview before he even released it was completely out of line. And you should watch the interview yourself. It's worth watching. And I think that Tucker actually did a fine job.
Well, I think the Babylon Bee summed it up. Journalists are confused by journalists doing journalism with a picture of Tucker Carlson. That's exactly what it is. It's not even farce. This is exactly what a journalist looks like.
It is 7:54.